are
Here we are.
live.
Here we
Yes,
are.
always the funnest intro, and I know we say this every time, but yes,
Will
we
it get old? I don't know. I'm not sure. It has not gotten old yet.
not yet. And so this time, I actually put a message that we're live in a few Slack channels that I never post in. Just some friends of mine that, who knows, they might show up. That would be fun.
It would be fun. And
I'm
and
excited.
this is by far, we were just talking before we went live, the nerdiest of these that we've done, and we've done some nerdy stuff, right? We did, yeah, you
Yeah,
and Lo did multi-tenancy. I went
that was
hardcore
fun.
into the
Yeah.
pagination spec. This is the nerdiest it's been, but you pair that with the fact that you built a rock and roll app to do an alive and kicking presentation at one of the cooler stages in the developer conference world.
Yeah, and they told me it's an 8K screen, but it's wider rather than high. And so it's like three IMAX screens into one. And they need five 6K projectors to kind of merge it together. It's very intense. It's a good
It's
stage to be on.
Yep. Especially for a presentation like this. Like everyone else, right? They had like their kind of like, here's my code, here's my, my Google
Yes.
Slides or whatever. No, not Tim Bennix, right? Tim Bennix, that's not what you're
No.
doing.
This was a 2.0 presentation almost. How do you
Yep.
say that? Because also I asked them, like, guys, I know this screen is like super wide, right? But everybody just gets like a little square in the middle. Can I just not get more? And they're like, but of course. Nobody ever asked. And so I had three picture in picture on the huge screen. And I'm not sure. Let me see if I can find you a little image so people get a bit of a gist of
That's what
how
you
that
had
works.
that LinkedIn post and that Twitter post where you compiled multiple images that people were
Yes.
taking, right?
Yeah, let me quickly find that because it gives you a bit of a vibe of what this was. Let's see. I wish I had this before, but here we go. We're live.
Let me know when you want me to put you up on the screen.
Let's say. Yes, here. You can put me on. I wish I could show this a bit bigger. And so this is not even half of the screen.
You're
See if there's
so small compared to your screens.
you see, so here it goes all the way back. So people actually have to look all the way on the left or the right
Yep.
to find the whole screen essentially. And so you can see the 500 error popping up here, but nobody needs to know that. I just said it, but you know what it is.
Yeah.
And so that was super fun to be on the stage. And there were about it. They changed the seat arrangement quite often, but I think they had probably 1,100 people on the
Nice.
stage, or on the stage against the stage. I don't know.
Yeah.
And they've had it for years where they had 1,400, but it was like a little dangerous. And so there's all these different setups because it's made for like, oh, how do you call those things? I always forget this word. It's like what you have on Broadway in New York.
Musical?
Musicals. It's made for musicals. So the big screen can open up and there's a huge stage behind, and there's like all these cool things they can do.
So next year they need to make it so it opens, and then we'll do a full musical behind it.
Who knows? I might be now. It's too much. Oh, I'm already sharing my screen again. And so maybe before I show this, let's take this off for a sec.
Yep.
Maybe now you've seen a few pictures. Let's talk about why I did this talk and what the talk actually was. Because
Yep.
just guitar doesn't do anything for tech folks. It's just fun.
Yep.
So I had to like kind of add a little bit to it because this conference is really, it's one of the coolest conferences if you're in the Vue.js world. There's one, VueConf US, it's excellent. There's one in London that's excellent. And then there's the one in Amsterdam that tends to be the biggest one. And so it's lots of the same speakers. We're almost like a family. Everybody knows everyone. And talks tend to be an expert on stage and people listening. It's almost like being in college. And then it's just because it's like that. Like these folks that speak there are really knowledgeable and they come up with like new software and new dev tools and new ways to run Vue.js. And then they talk about it, but it's kind of it. So there's no interaction back or not much. And so by lunchtime, people want to go for lunch, even though they just had one of the best talks of the year. That's just the way this vibes. And I felt like I kind of need to change it up, and definitely not to be better than others, but to just be different. Like wake people up, say, this is the vibe of this conference. And so what I felt like I wanted to do is like, if I played guitar and I played it loudly and I played it relatively well, people would enjoy it. But now, how does that fit my job? How does that fit Vue.js? How does that fit anything? Because just guitar is not interesting. And so I thought, why not make like a karaoke, but for guitar, not singing, because you don't want to hear me sing. Like, I have a lot of proof of that, but I won't give it to you. Like, just don't ask me to sing.
Maybe in our internal Slack, you can send me an example.
I have examples where I would record with fellow musicians an album and I would have to sing backing tracks. And then they had to really remove my tracks because it was horrible, or speed it up, or like slow it down so I could reach the pitch and then speed it up again, like all the things. This was before autotune, right?
Yep.
And so I decided, let's play guitar in front of this audience, but using only my laptop and the guitar. No amplifiers, no buttons, no nothing. Let's use as much of the browser and Vue.js to actually make this happen. And so to actually get a really good sound, we cannot rely only on the browser. Like there is some audio processing in a browser, but it's really not close to anything real sounding. And I know a few folks have done some of this work to kind of like, hey, you want an echo on your sound? You can do it in the browser, but it's really, really rudimentary. So I did decide to use a virtualized amplifier. So I plug my guitar into something that makes an analog signal digital. It comes into the computer, and then that thing would process it and then sends it back out through the speakers, and it sounds like an actual guitar. And this has been around for a few years, but it's so good now that you start to see these things like people bring their own apps to a studio, plug in, play, and go away again. You don't need a fan anymore with all your speakers and all the crap. Of course, we all want that. You don't really need it. If it's in a mix, you don't hear it. So I used studio grade professional stuff, and it's like $110. It's crazy. I come from the time when you had, amps like that,
Yep.
like the
The
huge
stack, right? Yeah.
stacks. We call them stacks, and we love it, right? The thing is, though, that was too much. So the whole idea is put this in a browser and see what you can do. And so to make the audience participating, I thought, why not have them vote on which song I play? And when they vote, they see themselves bounce around on the screen. And so maybe it's time to, share my screen a little bit to
Yeah.
show, because we have a bunch of new folks coming in, watching us here.
And I'll
So
say, if you are interested in any specific pieces as we go through, make sure you put it in the various chats wherever you are to let us know what you want us to dive into. Because when we get into the code of this, Tim and I were looking at it before the stream. There's so much interesting there that we're not going to cover it all in the stream today. So if you want help
yeah,
guide
it's
us along our path, let us know.
exactly. It's a little intense, but we can do it. So what I came up with for this year, because I've done it a few times last year, almost like a test run. This year I wanted extra stuff, and I came up with the thing to make a medley. And then when I spoke to my peers about doing a medley, they didn't know what medley meant. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to change this up, because the idea that what I wanted to do is I wanted to play a bunch of songs, but I wanted the audience to choose which songs and also in which order to make one mash up of multiple songs or a medley. Generally, medleys are very nice because what happens is that they actually move from one song to the next really smoothly with a few chords and rhythm. I couldn't really do that because I didn't know which song would come next because the audience would vote. And so the point is, you can see here, this is what the people would see. And of course, they would probably be on their mobiles
So
in the
it's
audience.
actually
They
important
would
to
see
note,
this.
like, not only were there the 3 big screens behind Tim, but there's
Yes.
also a screen where you take your QR code, select the QR code, and get the ability to vote. And the audience was actually able to do that at the time.
Yeah. So there's so much to this talk that I actually forgot the most important part. What you see on the screen here, can I zoom that in just a little? I think so.
Yeah.
This is what you would see on your phone when you scan the QR code. You log in with Twitter, LinkedIn, or whatever you have. And I'm using Supabase to do the login. It's literally one line of code. It's ridiculously awesome. You come here, and so we are going to do a mashup. And so I sold it in the way, okay, you're going to be your own DJ, right? Because DJs tends to have like a 30-minute set where they have a few songs that just go flow into each other. It's one big performance. Sometimes it's their own song, sometimes it's other people's songs, stuff like that. And so I thought, well, I recorded 8 songs, so I can just select spot number 1. What song do I like as an audience member for song number 1? Well, maybe let's say I want to go for Bon Jovi. Or maybe I want AC/DC for number 2. And I want Metallica, and then I want Michael Jackson. And so now you can see a bunch of things happening on the screen here, because you can also then share whatever your mashup was, or whatever song is like one of your favorites. Right? So you could potentially do this, and then it would make you a share URL. Let me just show you what that looks like. So this is the mashup that I just made. And so you could share this. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff going on behind the scenes that we'll explore now. Because now, when I actually go to what you would see on the screen behind me while you are voting, you can constantly change these things, right? And so I'm just doing it on localhost because why not? Behind me, you see this screen. And you see there's one vote on these 4 songs. And so if I would change Bon Jovi or remove it, and then let's see, let's go Green Day, and like things would, oh, that's not it.
Too many tabs.
Too many tabs. Oh, and so now, oh, I made a boo-boo.
You hit the
Let
play
me
button.
reset it. I clicked on play, and then things happen.
It's also important to note when you're doing things like this, even if it looks ugly, like what Tim just showed, having an admin panel of some sort to control things and
Oh,
easily
it's
get
so
out of
nice.
mistakes, super clutch when you're presenting.
Oh yeah, I've used that a few times actually. So let me just quickly show you what happens, like just like this. See, I cannot really make it smaller, but when I
Yeah.
select a song, you see that there's like a little face
There's
bubble
Tim.
of me
Little
bouncing
Tim.
around. And then every time I change the song, you can see directly that the interface updates. And then when I have 4 of them, it now makes a cloudinary image that I can share. But every time I change, you'll see a bouncing bubble of my face because I was logged in with, in this case, I think it's Twitter.
So real
And
fast,
so,
Tim, there's a lot of things happening here and a lot of data on the screen, right? So we have artist and song information, we have
yep.
live votes, we have authentication with users. Where
Mhm.
are those pieces coming from, and how are they getting to the screen?
Before I dive into that,
Okay.
let me show you one more thing, which is when we play. Right.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
this is this. So if like we had like 1,100 people on the screen or in the conference voting, right, and they were constantly, all of them were like going, oh, let's get to song number 2. I want another one. I want to change it. And then so there were like 1,000 bubbles on the screen. At one point, it was so much I couldn't see the interface anymore. That's how many people were voting, which is super fun, right? And so while people were voting, at one point, I had to decide, okay, I'm gonna start playing song number 1, and while I play number 1, they can still vote for 2, 3, and 4 to change, so I wouldn't know what song would come. And so when I actually go here, and you can see here there's spot number 1, and you see the 4 songs that were voted on, and this is the active one. And so this you would also see behind me. Before I go into what happens here, when you actually go to yet another URL that is actually on the side of the screen, because remember, it's this huge screen, right? You can actually see that it's now showing you Aerosmith, the band information on the screen while I'm actually playing Aerosmith. But when I now go into Guns N' Roses, this will then change into Guns N' Roses, and it's all live connected. So I don't have to refresh this browser because it kind of just looks at whatever is in the database of the active song, and it will just change. And then there's also, on the other side of the screen, we have the statistics. And of course, it's still the 500 error because I didn't solve it after the conference. Okay, this is one of those moments where I'm just not going to show you that.
Yeah.
Anyways, what happens here is when I start playing this, I don't think you'll hear this over the stream. I heard the music here though, but I can just turn it off. So there's a lot happening here. While you're voting, you can still see the face bubbles. So I can actually do that if I wanted to. You see, there's my little bubble going down the bottom. I can change it to another one. And so you can still vote. But what you've now probably noticed is the moment I started playing this song, I can now, my spot one is locked. I can no longer vote on Aerosmith because imagine you could vote for spot one and that song gets a lot of votes. It could also go to spot number two. And then it would
Defensive
be really
programming
boring.
at its best here. Defensive programming.
Oh, yeah. This is like full force ahead defensive programming here. Okay, so a few things of note. We'll go into those a little later, but you can see there's actually a guitar tone here, Joe's funky tone. And that's connected to my virtual guitar amplifier. But when I now go at one point and it becomes a guitar solo time, this interface will change because the browser is talking to my virtual amplifier to make sure it changes sound, because from the chorus to the bridge to the solo, I need guitar sounds to change to make it, sound real. And I'm not sure when this will, let's see if there's a solo around here somewhere. Oh yeah, here now it went to Tim solo, and anyways, doesn't really matter for now. We'll go into how that connects in a sec. But what I wanted to show you is when I'm near the end here, there's a countdown timer. And so people can still vote on this one. And so when it actually goes to 0, it will refresh, go to another one, directly start playing, and then number 2 here is locked for everyone in the audience. And just to build that, it's pretty ridiculous, but it kind of works. And so this thing is just going on its own, and people keep voting, right? And so these spots keep changing. And then when this hits the end, there's another countdown, and I'm better look at the screen to know what song is coming up. And while this was happening, of course, there was less and less votes towards the end. And so now it just goes to the next. And you can see here that spot 3 is now locked. And so all that stuff kind of talks together through Supabase. And so maybe this is the time to talk how things are connected. And then after that, maybe we can talk about how does this audio player work? How do you talk to your guitar amplifier? Because what the heck is that?
And that audio player is just
how-
one giant view component, right?
It's all Vue components. It's all
Yeah.
Vue.js. And I use Vue.js because I know it. But this, you could have built this with any framework, because in the end, it's just lots of features that come together, but it's not that complex once you know what's happening, right? There's no higher science here. There's just the usage of Mac-Alliance stack that works so well together if you just connect it in the right way. And then suddenly magic happens. And so where do we start, Brian? Maybe the CMS, where all these songs live.
So let's outline the types of data, right? We have
Yeah.
semi-static data, we have live data, and we have user data. So let's start with the semi-static data, right? That would be our CMS data.
That's a good move. So of course, the data lives in Hygraph, because that's where we work. That's what, like, Hygraph is a really, really good system to be able to save data and make it properly structured. And this content wasn't too crazy, but I was pretty happy that it was in Hygraph. And so I have basically only one schema. Maybe we start with the schema.
Yep.
I have a song schema. So I have an ID for a song, the song title, its length, the MP3 location. This is an interesting one. If I added the MP3 in Hygraph or in Cloudinary, or like some external service, not on the server where the website is hosted, the server where it's hosted would decide how to stream that file in chunks or directly, or like a whole bunch of things, like loading 2 seconds first and then maybe the rest. I had so many issues serving this file from different places that in the end, what I did, this just holds a string. And so I just grab it from my own code base, and then it works perfectly.
It's important to note, right? Like those chunking and all those different mechanisms, they're super important for like a really good user experience for just like, hey, I'm watching a movie or I'm listening to a song. Maybe not so much when you're trying to play along with the song on stage, right?
Yeah, because I need the timing to be perfect. I need the whole thing to be downloaded. I need the bit rate to be the same. I need to be all the things because I'm depending on the audio player to send me events every so many milliseconds of I am playing. This is the playhead because I have to do a lot of things based on that playhead, right? So that's how that works. Then the cover image of the artist comes from a Cloudinary integration into Hygraph because historically I'm a Cloudinary user and all my stuff is basically always there. Like my whole management console is full of stuff.
There's a dog.
And then we have things like artwork and presets. I'll show you those in a second because these are actually components in Hygraph. And artist, the logo of the artist, the biography, when they were formed, and their hometown, because I kind of wanted a little bit of extra fun stuff.
So I, I
And
want I
so,
want to take a quick pause here real fast because I
sure,
imagine you're about to dive into the presets, right? Uh,
yes, I will.
and this is you've got a blog post written that's not live yet, but it's either live this week or next about
Mhm.
volatile data versus domain data, or like the
Yes,
idea of like visual building versus data-driven CMS work, and the
exactly,
fact that you are building this song and it's got this data stored, but it also has like the presets for your amp stored in it. So it's not a page builder. You're not building the page out
Mhm.
of it. You're storing important data for multiple applications
Exactly,
inside of one schema in Hygraph. And that's like, I feel
yeah,
like that's very much that domain driven data kind of situation.
100%. Yeah, the whole idea of the way I use the CMS in this talk is just for each song, I have a bunch of metadata, right? And that needs to live there and it never changes unless I decide to change a sound for something or maybe a naming of something. But it's not like a design related thing of the image is left or image is right. There's none of that in here. So what I've chosen to do is all the metadata and the data and the assets and the imagery are in one schema that I can then put in an iPhone app if I want to in a year. Probably won't, but I could. And so this is not page builder related. You're not going to see a preview of this data anywhere because it's literally used as a database. And so I'm just here in the Trooper by Iron Maiden. I never played songs like that in my life, but the audience demands rock. Like this is so funny. Every time I talk to folks about this thing, like more metal, give us the things. So this is a pretty iconic song to add, right? So you can see here my MP3 for my public folder. I just put it like that because that was the only way I got it to work.
Yep.
And this is not to say that Hygraph streaming server is not working for audio. It's just in this application, I needed to do it differently.
It's working its specific way to do most use cases, just not this
Yes,
use case.
exactly. So each song has these amp presets, right? So this amplifier I have here, this is a virtualized amp, and you can see it actually has different models inside of it and different speaker cabinets. It's really, really magical. You can even choose what speaker, but also what microphone and how far is it away from the speaker. Like you can do all the things in here. And so what I needed is to make a few different ones. Like I have a metal preset that looks like this. Then I have a punk preset. You see it's slightly different again. And so there's all these different presets. And so they all come with like different knobs I'm turning. And normally I would do this in person. Like all this stuff that you see here, it's behind me. I have the real stuff.
You
You're just
actually hit the knobs and you push
virtualizing
the
it.
buttons and
Yes. I didn't want to do that because the whole point was let's use Mac technology and virtualized stuff,
yep.
headless things. So what I've done here is for Iron Maiden, the first preset that I want is called Up the Irons. That's what a lot of Iron Maiden fans say. You know, when Iron Maiden plays, that's what they say. And I want to have preset number 4 at second number 0. Then, when I go to the next bit, at second 14, I want preset number 5, and it's called the troops. And then when I go, and then it just continues like that, right? So you essentially make chapters from second 0 to 14, it sounds like that. From second 14 to 39, it sounds like that. So you chapterize your audio essentially. And so while the thing is playing, my code actually speaks to the amplifier to change the sound. And so when it's time for the solo, it will probably find me the heavy solo preset. And so after the solo, it probably just goes back to the clean or whatever, something like that. And that's all set up in the CMS here. And what I could have done, but I haven't done, that's a little nerdy, but I made these components. So these components are an instance of data that is connected to my song. But what I could have done is maybe make them their own schema, because what I could have, like this heavy solo sound, also works in a Van Halen song or in a Metallica song. So I could have made that a thing on its own that I would link to also. But for now, it's so specific and so detailed with like the names and stuff that I just connected it as components to my schema here.
Since
And
last
then
week
we
while
have
you were gone, Lo and I talked about content modeling a decent bit.
Mhm.
And one of the things to think about here, right? Like you could do that, but this is actually one of those pieces that I would almost consider it's the audio equivalent of page building, right? You actually want
100%.
this to be volatile. You want it to be like you could certainly set up those numbers as a model, and maybe you might want the name of it, but preset 4 you call Up in Irons here because Iron Maiden fans think of it in this way. So it
Yes,
is,
and
I think,
also
still
it's at
fully
second
volatile.
39 of this song.
Yep.
So how do I store that specific thing if it's a thing on its own?
So no matter what, you'd be in a component, right? Because you would still need
Yes,
these. The only thing would be you could abstract the name and maybe the preset number out. Or if you got
potentially,
really
yeah.
nerdy, you could bring all of the signals in somehow and send like each of the individual items into the pre. Instead of having a preset, you can actually have it do the presets in high. Yeah, super nerdy.
Yes.
This works, and I probably like personally, this is how I would have set it up.
If you wanted to, and I'll go in like for 1 second. I could put a bunch of fields here. Right now it's only PC4, right?
Yep.
So when we look at this amp, it has like this interface here. When it says if it's PC number 4, go to the preset Tim Metal. You can
Mhm.
see that here. I'm afraid I cannot make this any larger.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, there's some magic in here because look, there's a lot of different things from values to toggles to button presses to 0 to 10 things. So, what I could potentially do is have 5 more fields here, and each field would actually say, have this button go here, have
Yep.
this button go here, have this button turn on. So I could make, well, let me just not save that because then I screw up my sound. But what you could potentially do is with Hygraph, create a whole sound through this API directly into your amp. So maybe next year, I will have the audience make my sound
Oh,
because every button here I can control from JavaScript.
yeah. And Vue.js
But
Amsterdam
also
keeps
like,
inviting you back to do it. You got to up your game every single year.
yeah, exactly. That's problematic, isn't it? Anyways, that's what the presets do. And then I have artwork because artwork is fun. And so if you go back to one of those songs, you see that like every, I think, 10 seconds, it goes to another piece of artwork because it's just fun to make that look good, right? So we have the specific song art, and then there's like, you see here, there's another image, and you can see it's like a little bit see-through, and that's just because I use it with Cloudinary and just give it an opacity of 30%. And so with a black background, it just looks decent. And so all of that, how this all looks, I just put it in here, select it in Cloudinary, and I also, this is a little page buildery, right? So I can say the X percentage needs to be 10, so it moves to the side a little. So I could do that here if I wanted to. And so there's some Cloudinary specific transforms I could add here too, that we could potentially do that in the Cloudinary interface that we have, but I chose to keep it a bit more simple and then do it like this.
Yep.
So that's the data side of things. Because
That's
like
the
the little
static
logo and
data
the
side of
artist
things.
and so, sorry?
So that's the static data side of things.
This is
There's
only
other types
static
of
data.
data too.
So all this stuff, all the data you see here, also the amp preset, all the stuff, this all comes from Hygraph. And so just before, I'm not sure everybody was here yet, but sharing this image, so this is a share URL that will have this as an OG image, so it will show up on your LinkedIn and your Twitter. All this information also obviously comes from Hygraph and is then put into an image by Cloudinary. And this is the user itself. Like I have a few users that did this, right? And so this is their user icon that comes from their login. So that also comes from Hygraph and this page as well. All right. Static data done. By the way, I see we have a bunch of people watching. If you have any questions, like as geeky as they get, from guitar tones to whatever, feel free to ask. We
I
are
will also
here
say
to help.
there's quite a few people on Twitter watching, and there's not really an easy way to interact with this on Twitter. So you can also
Mm,
come on over to the YouTube channel or LinkedIn to join the actual chat. Or hey, you know what? You could also head on over. I'm gonna do this instead of at the end. You could head on over to
here we go. Here we go.
slash.hygraph.com, right? And you
Oh
could ask
no,
your
we have a
questions
new
there.
sticker. I like it.
Yeah. Oh, Angie changed that yesterday. I forgot to change it back. But
Yeah,
yes,
so fancy.
yeah. So if you head over there, right, you can ask your questions, and we'll get it there as well.
Exactly. All right. Now I think it's time to have a look at how this more dynamic data is actually happening. And so for that, I use Supabase. And Supabase, for the folks that don't know, because they're not in the Mac Alliance actually, they are basically like an open source and much cheaper alternative to Firebase that was built by Google a few years ago. But I think they've deviated a little bit. I don't think they would like me saying that it's like Firebase, because it's kind of wide ranging and super awesome. And so what they do is they give you login and registration capabilities for your app for users. They give you storage for media. They give you a Postgres database. They give you serverless functions and edge functions, real time, a whole bunch of amazing things. And you can literally build um, a SaaS application in like a weekend with them, because all the things you would normally build yourself, they'll just give it to you, and they have a great SDK. You plug it in and you go. I've used it for many projects and it's just fun. And they have these like memes on Twitter where their boss would say, "Oh, you worked so hard for 4 weeks. It's amazing." And then turns out someone just did it in like 2 days because Supabase did everything. This is true. It's incredible. So I use their authentication. You can see, oh, let's not show people's emails. I just went away from that fast. So we have authentication, but then they also have a bunch of database things that I use, right? So um, for example, I have a photos database where I store, you can see how many photos I've seen already. There's like 35,073. So lots of photos have happened. And so I just clean it every time. So you can see the user, you can see the song, the user's avatar, and you can see their email. In this case, it's mine. So you're fine. You can see this. And then here, which mashup spot did this song go to? Like ACDC went to spot number 2 by this user. And so this is incredibly fast storage because I don't do joins, it's just this. And so I made a little Postgres view to see how many votes per song there are, which is basically a super, super, super duper optimized version of querying this thing, but built on Postgres. That's where Postgres starts to be so amazing. They can do so many things. And then I also have like what song was played in the mashup. So I can lock your screen so you cannot vote again. And then we have all the shares. So you see, these are the shares that people did during maybe the last conference I did. And so it's which user, their avatar, and the fact that was it a mashup or just a song? And then the song ID or all the IDs. And then based on this, I query this, get the specific data for these song IDs from Hygraph, build the image, share. And then I have a little config, which is super clean. It's like, am I in mashup mode or not? And what is my currently active song based on what I'm playing? And let me quickly show you what mashup mode actually means. Mashup mode is that we vote for these 4 songs, right? And so when I go to my quick config, that is extra secret that nobody's supposed to say. If I reset all these things, now when we go back to Supabase, the votes are gone, the songs plays are gone, all that. And now when I set it to normal mode, you can now see in Supabase that my config says, okay, I have no active song, my mashup mode is false. And then when you actually go and vote, you can just vote on any song without making it, a mashup.
If they had wanted an encore, Tim could have set this up and said, "All
That's
right,
what I
what's the
did
encore
actually.
song? Everyone vote."
I did that last time because they gave me 45 minutes instead of 25. So I was like, oh crap, I have 4 more songs to play. Let me just put it in normal mode so people can just vote on whatever. And then like this live screen that I was behind me just shows you all the songs and their votes, and I just click one, I start playing, no countdowns, and then so this is just a different mode. And I decided to put that in the database so I can just quickly change things up. All right, so you see those votes, right? So every time you do a vote, it will actually update something in this table. And I think, didn't I just vote? Oh, I removed the vote again, I think. Let me just vote for this. There's my vote. And you see that they themselves also use real time because it just updates this interface immediately. So in real time, what you can do, you can actually, yeah, I didn't know this existed, but what you could do is actually when you are doing the real time thing, you can see all the things happening here.
Yeah.
And so what I've built now, when you hit a vote or remove a vote, there's a real-time channel listening in Supabase to this fact that I'm voting now. And based on that, I can do a whole bunch of different things, right? Let me just put it back to the mashup mode because that's what most people actually have seen. Now when we go back to live, and then when I actually click on this and we start playing this, now in Supabase, when we go back to the database, it says actually that the active song is the Trooper, because that's what we have here. And because of that, this page is listening to that on the real-time channel, and directly it shows you Iron Maiden. But if I just open this in another tab, and we go back to another song, let's say Bon Jovi. This is now Bon Jovi. The image is not there yet because I didn't want it to flip quickly. So it's the next animation that it would do. Now it's Bon Jovi.
There it is.
And then it says Bon Jovi. And so every time I go to another song, this is now updated immediately.
And so, real fast, right? This is a connection. Technically, it's not a connection, right? But it's a combination of 2 databases that work at the same time. You've got your real-time database in Supabase, and you've got all your content stored in Hygraph, and they're working together to build these screens.
Exactly. And this will just literally query Hygraph, give me that thing. I might have optimized it that this thing, because it's not a refresh of this page, I might have queried all songs, put them in a state somewhere, and then just flip the data to the other one.
Also, that is way safer when doing this live as a presentation than if, like, what happens if the internet goes down? Well, you've got all the data stored other than the live data.
Exactly.
So.
And if you look at, there's only been 2K of calls. So it only did 2,000 calls to Hygraph. So I was quite optimized.
Yep.
And so what's interesting here is it's a WebSocket connection. And that WebSocket connection only gives me an event that says if something has changed, not what the change was. So if there was an update to a database or a new field or a removal you can choose, then I would just requery. So the information over the wire of the change is just the fact that something got added, removed, or updated. And then I would actually fire something in my app to requery. And so when you see people voting and their face bubbles move around, the bouncing stuff, that's the same thing. Every time somebody votes, there's a new row in this voting database. And so the WebSocket would tell my code, there's a new thing. And I would just query the last vote that somebody made. Doesn't matter who it was. I just query the last vote and push it out, and the bubble shows. And the interesting thing is, maybe now it becomes quite real and complex how you do that in code, because I'm using Nuxt with Vue. And if you look at this, I need to find a nice real-time example. Real-time. Okay, so I have this real-time channel creation thing. Let's see where I fire this one. Yeah, so so this one is maybe interesting. So I create a real-time channel, and this is the band page. That's the one with this one. This screen. So this is listening to a change on a certain database of what song is active at that moment, right? And so I make a real-time channel, and it says, okay, from the config database. Wait, no, that's not the thing. Where is it? Here it is. So it's called config changes for the table config and only on an update. And once that happens, do this callback, and it's called refresh song. And this is where Nuxt comes in. It's so freaking awesome because Nuxt.js has this use async data hook. Can I call it a hook? They tend to call it a composable, but it's
Yeah.
a hook.
Different frameworks, right? But it's all the same kind of idea.
Exactly. And so what this does is normally this when it runs this thing, it's like I'm going to query this. This is my cache key. I'm going to do this. I'm going to query my Supabase client from the config, get me everything with where the key is active song. And it just returns a single field. And then I query that song from Hygraph, which is like this is like a nice optimized way of doing a GraphQL query in Nuxt. So I'm actually querying the song live. I don't have them all, like we just said. I actually query it, and so I have the
Living
data.
on the Edge. You should play that song next year.
Oh yeah, I can do that. And then it just returns all the data how it needs it. But the cool thing is with Nuxt, it has this refresh property for the fetch. So the moment an update happens from the real-time channel that you subscribe to, it fires the refresh song, it will query again and return it. And if it's the same, it's just a cache call. And so this makes this incredibly easy and fast. And so if you want to see how I do this um, when playing song updates happen, like I have this, in this case, I made two real-time channels. One for the votes with an insert, and one which songs are played for every type of thing, update, removal, insert. And the callback in this case would be just refetch me all the votes for the songs and get me the latest vote back, please. Update my global state, and then things happen in the app. And then here, if for the table songs played something happens, just grab me all, like requery that thing and set up the state of my app. And so what I'm doing with all these real-time channels, I'm constantly querying things, refetching things, and setting it in my store. And so I have a store here that is a global state of the app. And so in the store, I can ask it, get me all the songs. This does a query to Hygraph. Get me the votes for these songs. It grabs the songs from here and then queries Supabase, updates all the vote information for all these songs, and then just sets that into the state. And then give me all the songs that have been played before. And then give me all the config values. So I'm just basically on setup of the song page. I'm getting just as much of data as possible. That I'm saying, well, I'm on the song page, right? And the song page is this one. Let me just, oh,
Too many views, too many different views.
oh yeah, this is the song page. So in here, I'm setting the active song to be AC/DC. And so you get a whole bunch of information from that song store. You're setting a few things. I'm setting up this real-time thing of listening to certain stuff. And so when a vote is happening, I just update the store. And then things that listen to the votes again from the store show certain stuff. Like if I hit a vote here, yeah, it's locked now. But if I vote here and you see the face bubble bounce around, that's because the store had an update for a vote. And so it's this whole publish subscribe kind of thing that's going on. And the more complex your app, the happier you are that this is happening. Because you don't want to code all that complexity with ifs and elses and stuff. And you see, there's not even that much going on. And then it just goes into the song player. And so
yeah, that's the key, right? There's not a huge amount going on there. What's the song player look like, Tim? And where does the complexity for all that come in?
Okay, so let's go into the player. So let's see, where are we with this one? Okay, so this song player has a bunch of different things going on. So this song player is literally this whole thing that you see here. So not the sidebar, but this here. And so the song player holds the information about AC/DC, Back in Black, how long is the song, what is my preset, what are the background images, and actually the player itself that gives you all this lovely EQ thing and the virtualization and visualization, all the words. And so this actually has a background slider based on the song that I received from my global state. Then it has a live votes component that has the bouncing faces in it. Then it shows you the song details, which is this bit here, ACDC, song name, things like that. Then we have the audio player itself. If in mashup mode, it's slightly different because on song ended, we have to find the next song with 10-second countdown. If it's not mashup mode, it's just a normal song without countdown, without going to the next. And then here we actually have the up next thing, which is here on the sidebar. So it is in here. So as you can see, this is not a big one again, but it's all put in like smaller components. And so perhaps the most interesting one is let's go into the live votes one and then let's go into the player because the player itself has a bunch of things. Okay, let's go to live votes. So the live votes has a bunch of things in it to make this animation of the bouncing faces that we just saw, right? And so um, there's lots of content based on that. But the most important thing to know about the data is I'm grabbing my store again. The global state of all the votes are in here, and the store is called Pina. That's something that is built for Vue and Nuxt, and it's an incredible thing. It's super powerful and super easy to use. I can well, let me just show you 1 second what that store looks like. It has lots of things. We don't want to go too deep, but it has like these async actions you can do to get certain things, to save a share in a database, or and it has all these getters like give me all the songs, give me the played song for a specific song ID, or give me the latest vote. That's what we're looking at now. So the latest vote is something that's set in the store based on that real-time channel saying, hey, something changed, update the latest vote. And then if the latest vote is updated, there's a getter in my global state to get this thing directly. And when you get it, it's also reactive. Just like you have in React, in Vue, you have something called ref, which is a reactive property, and that updates the moment the store updates. So here, I get my latest vote from the store. And there's a whole bunch of things going on here in the client side. Like when this component mounts, it actually creates a canvas. And I'm setting gravity to be 0.99. Don't ask me why, but the bubbles bounce nicest this way.
Real fast, Tim. What is
Yes.
Canvas?
Oh boy. Yeah, we have to go back and
What's your 1 to
now.
2 sentence piece on that, right?
Yeah, let me just show you here. So this is an HTML canvas tag. And a canvas tag is essentially something that you can paint with pixels in JavaScript. That might be the simplest way of saying it. Like in the browser, you have HTML, DOM nodes, styling with CSS. Sometimes you just want to paint a picture or do something crazy that you might be able to do with the DOM, but it's not performant enough because every HTML tag that you see, let's say like a div, has a whole bunch of properties against it in JavaScript and in CSS, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. So that has memory. What if I want to do 1,000 bouncing face balls based on a certain gravity and craziness?
You
If you do
could,
that
in theory, do a few bouncing face balls in the DOM. Like I can
100%,
even visualize the code there, right? But the
I know
amount
how
of
to do it.
repainting going on for that would be it would destroy a browser.
Yeah, it would just completely destroy it. And the cool thing is, this thing needs to run at 60 frames per second while I play music, while it visualizes the audio, while balls are bouncing, and while it listens to the playhead, right? Because based on the time, it needs to change the audio, and there's all these things going on. The canvas is so performant. What you can do with a canvas, just as a quick example, you can actually get a video source of a video player in the browser that's 4K, put it into the canvas by reference, and it can analyze every pixel for RGBA live and give you the numbers of the RGBA of every pixel while it plays live. That's how fast the canvas is. So it's painting with pixels. And so that's what we're doing. And so I'm literally just, I made um, a, a class called ball. And the ball has an image. And that image is actually the image of you as a user when you logged in. Or if you don't have an image, I just give you a little base64 gradient circle. And it has a radius of 25. And it does a whole bunch of thing that I will not go into now because we're 50 minutes in.
Yep.
And every time it hits an update with a request animation frame. And request animation frame refreshes a function as fast as the browser or your computer CPU allows you to. So generally, this will go to 60 frames per second. And every 60th of a second, it will fire this animate function. It will clear the canvas and then redraw your ball with all these different kind of little randomized things. And that's why you see it moving, because it's like every 60th of a second, it will repaint it, paint, 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 paint. And then it does that for 1,000 balls without breaking a sweat. And so what I'm doing, I'm looking at the latest vote. When a new vote comes in, I do some magic that you don't want to know. I actually remove how do you call this? I remove the reactivity by Vue.js from my vote because I don't need all that information. I just need to push like a little, just the user avatar field from that. So I kind of just clean it up.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes it's so fast with the voting that there might be 5 new votes. And so I loop over the votes and I push a new ball with the user avatar and then run. And then every 5 seconds, I remove the last one in the list. And that's how that bounces around and all that fun happens. And I glossed over how crappy this was to code, but I had a lot of fun with it, to be fair.
Animations like this are time consuming to make and not exactly
Yes.
fun to listen to how they were made.
No, so we won't go into it, but if you're keen, this is open source. You can just find it on my GitHub and play with it. All right. So now the next thing we should have a look at is actually this player. So let's have a look at the audio player. And this might be my biggest achievement in this code base, because doing an audio player or a video player seems kind of simple, right? You might say just do a video tag and listen to the events. The thing is, this thing needs to be able to do a lot of different stuff. It needs to have a big play button in the middle, but I might want to change that over time. Or it needs to have an audio EQ that listens to the file it's playing and shows you something in a canvas. Or it might need a 10-second countdown to go to the next song. Or it has a playhead and it needs to know the different chapters that we have to change the audio for the guitar. You see, it needs all these features. So rather than me building one big monolithic piece of code that does all that with ifs and else's, I made a very simple player that you can extend with something new that you want and then listen to the events. So as you can see, there's a bunch of events that happen in audio players, right? Play, pause, my data is loaded, I'm waiting, I'm playing, I have a time update. And time update happens every 10 milliseconds, I think, or something like that. And so what I've done is I created an audio player and I bind these events. So I loop over the events and I say, just bind this event and then send it through that player and bubble it upwards. And I don't want to go too deep in how this is done because there's a few Vue.js related things and a few JavaScript related things. But everything that happens in the player is basically sent out with an event listener. And sometimes I just do any event, all of them, but there's also specific ones. Like if it's loaded data, if that event is fired, only then I can figure out the duration of the audio file. So I just like this if thing, like, oh, the data is loaded. Now let me quickly set the duration, because otherwise you cannot make the little bar that goes from 0 to 100% of playing, because I need the duration. And so when it's a time update one, I quickly also, let me just do the percentage played, like 0 to 100, because then my bar is very easy to build, right? It's just a percentage of how wide the bar needs to be versus the container. And when it's a volume change, so there's a few things that I do specifically, and the rest I just pipe it through. And so it's the event also, and also a bunch of little functions that I'm sending. And what this is, an emit. This is a thing in Vue.js that you have in other languages too. I basically emit an event from a component to another place, either upwards, well, in this case, it's upwards, or to something we call a slot. And so what I have here, now, so now we go to the player, like this is the player implementation, right? You see there's only a few things like set playing, true, toggle play. If it's playing, pause it. Like there's simple functions in here, like convert time to duration. How far are we along? Like there's all these like basic things in here, and then there's my audio tag. And that this is where the magic happens. There's this thing called a slot in Vue.js, and I know it's in Astro, and I don't think it exists like this in React, but it's just the children thing. You put a child somewhere, and then it has the context of the stuff that's above it. That's what you do in React. And in Vue, you can just call it a slot, and you can name it. So these are specific slots for the controls. And you can see I bind a bunch of information of all the things we've just figured out in this player to that slot. So when I now write some code inside the child of this play as a child of this player, I get all this information right there scoped to me, which is super nice. So now when we go to the player itself, without looking at this for a sec, you see there's my audio player. And this add play is just listens to one of those emits. So when it starts playing, I can do some stuff with that play state. Or when it's ended, well, I need that ended because then I can just go to the next video, the next audio clip if I want to. And there's a time update and there's a volume change, and I can do a bunch of stuff with the interface based on these functions. Like when I do on player time update, I set the time based on the current time of this audio player. And this is a reactive variable inside my component here.
Now,
Right?
in the
So
interest of time, Tim, since
yes,
we're running up against it, let's talk about you have your amp, and the amp needs to
yes,
know when to change presets. So how does that work? We saw how it worked in Hygraph, right? We saw the time codes, but how's that
yes, we
working
did.
here?
Yeah, so this actually is a perfect bridge because I was talking about this slot controls, right, just now.
Mhm.
And it's getting all this information. And also you can see on time update, it was setting this time.value thing, right? And this is now where the magic happens to do something with this guitar amplifier. I have a MIDI component, and that gets which song it is, and it gets that time. And so that time is constantly updating when it's playing. So this component knows exactly every time the time updates what that time is. So let's now go to that MIDI component. So let me just talk 1 minute about what MIDI is, because I think this might be one of our oldest APIs ever.
Yeah.
We're talking 40 years here, maybe longer. I think they maybe have had beginnings of MIDI in like the 80s.
Yeah.
So what MIDI is a way to for devices to talk to each other, right? So this thing can talk to this thing via MIDI. So when I press a key here, the output of that is a MIDI signal, and this one receives it and can do something with it. This one can press a button, it's a MIDI signal that goes here. And so most modern keyboardists will have a MIDI controller in their keyboard because every MIDI can do a lot of different things. But the cool thing is, even though it was meant for only, how do you call these things, like actual devices you hold in your hand, it is also working virtually now. So I made a MIDI receiver in my Mac. You can just set that up. It's really easy. And then this amplifier listens to that MIDI receiver. When I go to the settings, select my IAC driver for Alive and Kicking. This is a MIDI input device. So this one is listening to something like this. However, there's something like this. In my case, is the browser. Because the browser has also implemented MIDI now. So over this device, I can send on a certain output something called PC2. And this one is listening to that preset here. So long story short, we have web MIDI. And let's see, where did I do all that stuff? So I'm getting the song and the time. And yeah, here we go. So the time updates all the time, right? Every 10 milliseconds, the time updates. And so based on that time, I'm finding the preset from Hygraph for my amp based on that specific time. So when we look at that function, I'm just going to check, okay, I just need the index of that preset because I have them all in a list, right? So I'm looping over all my presets, and then it just looks at the add value. And the add value we see here in Hygraph to my preset. I know we have time, but I need to explain it. Otherwise, it's completely crazy.
Yep.
The add here is 0. Then the add here is 14. This is a second number. So if the time currently is higher than the preset number of where it needs to start, then okay, this is the index of the preset I need. And then it just figures out what that name is and sends it back. And so then I have that information, and then I can set the preset here. So when I set the preset, if it's already existing, I don't set it because it would every 10 milliseconds change the audio of my amp to the same thing. And there's like a half a second delay. That's horrible. So I don't do that. But the moment that's not the case, I go to my output, which is our IAC driver alive and kicking. And that's like the web MIDI output, which is the input to this bad boy. The input is that driver. And here for the browser, the output is that driver. So I say, oh, for that output, grab channel number 1 and send the program change that you find in Hygraph. And that program change is one of those.
Yeah.
Program change PC2, 3, 1, whatever. And that comes out of Hygraph like this, PC4, PC5. And so essentially, these have become chapters. And it just listens to, where am I in the song? Has it currently been set? Yes, I do nothing. If not, send the change and go. So it's all listening to that publish of the audio player.
And honestly, like just listening to this and like translating to other types of use cases, right? If you were using this sort of idea, you said chapters, right? Like I think about YouTube chapters a lot, right? We optimize the videos to have chapters and all that. Like it's the same kind of thing. You could put the number of seconds or whatever it is, and if you had a custom video player, do a very similar thing to mimic and like clone the YouTube functionality.
Maybe one thing quickly, because it's just pure fun for me. When you hit play, you see this thing here, right? Mm-hmm. But when I turn down the track volume, you don't see it anymore.
Yeah, we just discovered that earlier, right?
Yeah, and this means this is like a real audio check. So I'm making an audio context in the browser. And there's a media element audio source node and an analyzer node, which is very interesting. So I'm grabbing the player as an HTML audio element. I'm making another canvas that we just talked about. And then what I do, I make a new audio context. I connect my player to that context through an element source, and I create an analyzer. It's all connecting business, basically. Let's not go too deep. And then there's a whole bunch of amazingly huge data. That's why I need a uint8 array to grab that buffer of whatever is coming in. And then I'm rendering 60 times a second again. And it does a bunch of information I won't talk about now. But it basically fills a little bit of a bar for each of those analyzer arrays. And that's what you see here. So this is the bass, and this is the highs, and this is everything in between. And like all these, like you see the little squares, right? That's just a PNG that I put on a texture that was normally like a little white div that goes up and down. Well, not a div, it's pixels. But this stuff is so fun to build.
Canvas, not the DOM anymore.
It's canvas, exactly. My old brain cannot deal with that. But like you see all these little, like this is not a lot of code. But inside this, there's just magic. Because this audio analyzer is just a lot of fun. And so there's a ton of those kind of things. I even did it for my guitar, but you see, I commented it out because I'm not using it. But yeah, there's a ton of things going on. And we haven't even talked about the sharing of the asset. Let me just, I know we're over time. Let me show you how this looks. Maybe that's the last thing.
Okay.
It's not the last thing, but I promise. So when you open this as a new tab, you see a lot of things going on. This is crazy as heck. So let me show you the code, and then that's the last thing, I promise. So let's see, how did I build this? Is there any specific thing for that URL? Do I have a
I'm
function
actually
built?
really hoping that you like hard code it, like that you put like all the query parameters in for the URL and didn't use some sort of component for it, but probably
You
not.
wish, right? You wish. All right, so let's do the create mashup image. So I'm grabbing from Supabase all these songs, right? So when I go to shares, you see there's basket case, walk this way, beat it, things like that. So I'm grabbing those as an array. And all songs is the query I get from Hygraph. So I just filter which ones I need. And then I map them to the artwork I need, the cover, the artist name, and what song it is. And then goes something crazy. So I have Cloudinary options here. And so I have, this is the folder Alive and Kicking. I have a background JPEG, which is just black. And this is the width and the height, and it crops it to fill. You have to do that to set it. And then the format is JPEG. So I now made a black JPEG. And then you can add overlays. And so you can just say the song, the first song that we want, the art of that song. So that's like, in this case, Johnny Be Good. And you put that northwest with a gravity of -50 with an opacity of 30, and this is the width and height. So now it goes to the left top and adds that image, which is left top. So it adds this background image here. And so I go on, the next song is going to be northeast, which is this one. And so all the backgrounds are built like that. Then I take the cover of the song and I put it in the middle with a 3px solid white border, which is these. And that is done like that. It's all repetitive stuff.
Yeah.
And then in the center, I actually put the avatar of the user, which is me in this case. And then I have like a specific overlay, which does my mashup and Fuji's Amsterdam and this my logo and stuff. And then I just make a Cloudinary URL with these options for my cloud name, and that's it. And this wasn't that hard. It's just configuration.
There's a lot of typing that goes into it, and occasionally you got to tweak things to figure it out. But once you get
Not
it, and set it,
occasionally. I almost died doing it, but this is the result. It's
Yep.
pretty cool, right?
Nice, yeah.
Anyways,
Honestly,
there's
I
more to talk
never
about this.
and I apologize, right? I never noticed that there were different images in the background, if I'm being honest.
Mhm.
Like, I knew that there were the foreground images. I thought there was just like a collage in the background that just was one static
Ah,
image, not
if you do it, look,
individual.
there's Michael Jackson behind. There's
Yep.
AC/DC. Like, this is real.
The work
And
that you
if I
went through so
wanted
that I
to,
wouldn't notice, Tim. Good job.
yeah, but if nobody notices, maybe I shouldn't do it.
If you hadn't done it, it wouldn't look as good. That's one of those things where it's like,
Exactly.
just because I didn't notice didn't mean that the feel of it didn't do the right thing.
Exactly. And
So
so what I did with this, when I shared this share link, of course, this is the OG image, but I also added like the hashtag of the conference in it. And so this is just free marketing for a conference where people just share their vote. The hashtag of the conference is in there. They have made something fun because it's their mashup. And so we had a ton of people actually sharing these. And so that was good fun.
yeah. So we
I
are
think
8 minutes over, Tim. And
that's pretty good. I have 4 more hours.
I know. So here's the challenge for both people watching live right now, but also if you're seeing this on on the YouTube video on demand later on. If you want Tim to talk more about anything specific in here, and if you want us to dedicate another stream to things that you saw that you want more details on, I need to know over in our community, right? So come in, join the community at slack.hygraph.com and say, I want to see Tim talk more about Canvas and how he set up those ridiculous numbers to make the things bounce. Or I want to see Tim talk about how Supabase communicated with Hygraph in a meaningful way. Let us know there, and we'll dedicate another one of these to this later. If you don't, then we're good, and we'll just have this on YouTube forever, and it'll be amazing.
Exactly. Or you might be a guitar player and you want to know what it sounds like.
Yeah.
There's a lot of nerdery that we can actually go into on the guitar side of things also.
Or if you come and join that community and let us know, maybe we can convince Tim to do we'll have to do a closed session, because actually VJS Amsterdam had a DMCA
They
takedown
had a
request
copyright
because of it.
strike, yes.
But maybe if we hide it behind a wall and maybe do it through StreamYard, we could do a virtual version. It wouldn't sound as good, but maybe if you come and join us in the community, we can convince Tim to do it.
The thing is, this is a part that we didn't even talk about, because yes, I have 4 hours here, but it's quite important. There's always DRM, DMC copyright stuff going on YouTube, right? So what I did with these songs, I made them all 2 minutes rather than their normal 4 or 5 minutes, because they're like 90 songs. And so what I did is used AI and I extracted all the things, the drums, the vocals, whatever. And then I cut it back, like remove all the bells and whistles, make it a simple song, 2 minutes, and I played all the guitars myself, all the backing tracks and everything. First of all, that's fun as a musician. Second of all, the songs are only 2 minutes then. And no copyright strikes, because it's so different, because I'm playing the guitar myself. But there was one song I just could not play. And so I decided to keep the original guitars in, and I also decided to keep it the original length. And this is Basket Case by Green Day. And you would think it's just a little punk song, right? You can just play that thing. Holy crap, no, you cannot. Like, this thing is sophisticated as heck. So I tried for 3 weeks to play that song, like, and to do my own guitar parts, right? No way. Like, I had it even in a way. I played the thing. It was out of time. So I went into my editor and I just put it on the timeline. Like, I cut and pasted my whole guitar. I let my wife listen to it, being same age as me. She knows that song but inside out. She's like, what the heck is that? That's not it. It's like, but it's really on time. It's exactly what he's playing. No, it's not. So the Trooper by Iron Maiden didn't give me much sweat, but the simplest song of the bunch I could not play. And so therefore,
easy.
No, exactly. I kept it in. And that's why we have the copyright strike on the stream, because it's a full song and I just played over it, and then it's too similar.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right. Other quick call outs. We do have comprehensive docs for Hygraph. So if there's anything that you're curious about in the way that Tim set up those components, or the way he's querying that stuff in GraphQL, all of that can be found at hygraph.com/docs. And of course, we do also have free accounts. Everything that Tim did for this was done on a free account. No special account for Tim, even though he is a DevRel. And you can get that at app.hygraph.com. And also, I'll point out, in a couple weeks, starting on March 20th, I don't have a banner for this. We are launching a beta for our new experience, Hygraph Studio, for working with Hygraph. And we'll be doing multiple events around why we're doing it, how we're doing it, and all the new features that are both in the beta and coming to the beta soon. So something to watch out for. Follow us on socials. Come join the community at slack.hygraph.com and get up to date on that in the near future.
It's very near now. We better
very
get going.
Near. I know this because DevRel is doing a lot of the launch events and
exactly, yeah.
and all of the we're testing the beta right now. Actually, we're
something of note. You will get the same features as you had before, and also Brian and I can both do our full jobs as DevRel without having a paid account or any update.
Exactly,
which is pretty important, because we've seen lots of companies around now, we won't name names, that remove their free tier and suddenly this complicated things happen. That's not the case at Hygraph. Like, you can make this thing that didn't even break a sweat with 1,000 people voting, 50,000 queries, all the craziness, and it just works.
And honestly, it's great because not only is the Hygraph version free for how you did it, but Supabase, right? You're in the free version of Supabase to power that.
Exactly.
So
I did have their CTO in my chat wondering, are we going to have to upgrade it? Did you figure out that, like, go live checklist? But it was fine.
Yep.
The only thing that might have been a paid account is my Cloudinary, because I've been a very long time user and they gave me an upgrade.
Yeah.
I think I could have probably done it without. The one thing that actually went wrong, which you don't expect, is that we rate limited the GitHub OAuth login, which is crazy. There's a lot of people.
As it turns out, developers, when presented the option to choose GitHub to log into something, choose GitHub to log into something.
Exactly. So we could have had a lot more users, I think, if GitHub didn't bork out. But all the other things stood the test of this thing, which makes me very happy.
Yep. Awesome. Well,
There
Tim,
you
thanks for
go.
giving us the tour of this. It's a
Sure.
huge application that you've written a couple years in a row now and updated in huge ways.
Yeah.
Anything you want to sign off with this week?
My brain is broken after like explaining this for an hour and 15. So not so much. I would say we would love it if you come into our community and chat with us about all things Hygraph. I think that's the one thing I would like to say. And maybe one other thing is that I will be doing this talk on a few conferences, even overseas in the US. And so isn't it crazy that I stopped going to school back in the day to play guitar? I made no money. It was horrible. I played in the smallest cafes week after week. Then I became a developer, lost my guitar a little bit. And now I play guitar in front of thousands of
You're
people
touring
while
almost.
being a... Sorry?
You're touring.
I'm literally touring. Like last year, I did like 7 of these throughout. Like I did London a few times. I did in Paris and Amsterdam. Athens almost worked out. So this year it will be also in the US. But if you have a conference that you like, and you want this to be like a lovely wake up call for people to start a conference or talk super nerdy, but like I've done this one also at a Cloudinary event where they only had customers. There was no tech involved at all. And it still works. You don't have to talk tech as much.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm on tour with my guitar as a DevRel. Who would have thought? I'm very excited about it.
Yeah. Cool.
So maybe that's the right bombshell to end on, right?
I think so. Yeah. Why don't you take us home, Tim?
By clicking end stream, you mean?
Yeah. See you all next week.
It's the only one. Cheers.
Yep.
All right. The button was us. Now it's